So next up is Nina Day from the Health and Safety Executive. Nina, I'll leave the floor to you. You going up there? Yeah. Just sort the slides out. Sorry. Just use the arrows. Just use the arrows.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Nina Day. I know some of you know me already, but if you don't, sorry, I'm not quite close enough. I work for HSE. I work in HSE transport sector, and I'm the lead for road transport and specifically load security. In a few weeks' time, I realised the other day with a slight bit of despair, it will be 23 years since I started working for HSE. And I say that not because I don't enjoy working for HSE, but because I did feel quite old at that point. And it will be 17 years since I started looking at load security and road haulage in particular. Now, a lot has changed in the last 17 years. It's changed in the industry, and the industry has faced and risen to a lot of challenges in that time. And I thought it would be useful to you today to just go over a little bit of where we've come from, where we are now, why we are where we are now, and what we can do in the future and what is coming down the line. When I started looking at load security back in 2007, this came to HSE initially because of an incident. And many of the things that have changed over the last 17 years have happened because of incidents, unfortunately. They've happened because people have been killed and they've been seriously injured. And that's something I think we never lose sight of from an enforcement perspective. I work very closely with my colleagues in DVSA on load security. You know, we speak every week about new issues that are coming in. And it's something we never lose sight of, that people are being killed, people are being injured. And these are serious issues that we need to try and deal with. And Phil made a really good point earlier, I thought. It's all about creating a level playing field. We know there are a lot of good operators out there and compliant operators and people who spend a lot of time and money trying to get it right, and other people don't. We've got to try and deal with the people who don't. Back in 2013, DVSA brought in a new enforcement approach to load security. Although the legislation had existed for a long time, it had been law since the 1980s, and there had been guidance in place since 1972, there wasn't a lot of detail about what operators needed to do. So the enforcement approach changed in 2013, and new guidance came in 2015. That changed again last year. The enforcement approach changed and the guidance changed this year, July this year. Why did we make those changes? I just realise I'm one slide behind now, so I'll catch up a little bit. Back in 2007, when we looked at the main causes of fatal and serious injuries in transport, there were 4 main causes for that. Falls from height, being struck by a moving object, that's how we code it in RIDDOR, but usually that means struck by a falling object. Struck by a moving vehicle, and trips, slips and falls on the level. Now, when you look at the detail of RIDDOR reports, a lot of these are actually load shifts. That's the root cause. If a vehicle arrives and the load shifted during the journey and you can't unload it the way that you normally would, what tends to happen? The driver or somebody on the site climbs up onto the back to try and sort it out, usually under a lot of time pressure. And that's the point where they fall off, or they trip over something on the back of the vehicle, or you just open the doors or pull the curtain back and something falls out onto you. So we have a regular stream of these coming through RIDDOR. What are the main causes of the incidents that we see now in 2023? Anybody want to guess what those are?
The same.
They are exactly the same, which is slightly depressing in a way. I think the industry in general has got better. That's my personal opinion. And I go out quite a lot with the police and DVSA at the roadside, and there is a lot more good practice around the vehicles that are brought in. But we still see the same root causes of incidents. When we were looking at updating the enforcement approach, one of the first things that I did with my colleagues in DVSA was to look at the data that we had. From proactive enforcement, what were the issues that were being seen again and again, but the incidents as well. Where were the problems? What were the sectors and the load types that were causing issues? And those informed the changes that we made to the enforcement approach. That's an example from a check that I was at 2 weeks ago with Derbyshire Police, and the driver thought that strap was fine. Not a problem. That yes, the damage had been there when he put it on the load. Unfortunately, that is not unusual. The ongoing aim that we always have with any changes that we make to enforcement is trying to bring clarity for operators. We are not trying to make your life difficult. We are trying to make your life more straightforward, bring clarity to things, bring consistency in terms of enforcement, and make sure that you're hearing the same message from the different enforcement bodies. And that is really important, because if you're trying to be compliant, you need clear messaging. You need to know what is acceptable and what isn't. And that's something we are always focused on. What certainly I tend to see, what I've seen over the last 17 years looking at load security, is that when we have issues, it is very rarely a driver doing something wrong on that particular day. It does happen. You do get people genuinely doing some silly things. I was at a check site a few weeks ago and a driver came in, first vehicle of the day. The load wasn't secured and he said, "I'll be honest with you, it's not strapped down because I couldn't be bothered. It's raining. Couldn't be bothered to do it." Which is a very good way of talking yourself into a ticket from the police, but never mind. But generally speaking, that's not the issue. It's not the individual drivers. The issues, the failings, are very often failings in the management system back at base. To me, load security in a vehicle at the roadside is very often a symptom of bigger problems at the company who have loaded it or the operator who's running those vehicles. And time and again, when I've gone back to the sites, that's exactly what I find. There are multiple issues. There are failings in the management systems. One of the I think this is a trap for people, and people do fall into this quite a lot. They think that if something is really dangerous, the disaster will happen straight away. And that's not the case. You can go for a very long time with a fundamental flaw in your business and you won't have a disaster. You won't kill anyone. I hear this all the time from drivers. I've been driving for 20 or 30 years. I've never killed anyone, so I must be doing it the right way. That's a really dangerous mindset to get into. Because the reality is, as Phil was saying earlier, you've been lucky in all that time. You can be lucky for 20 years. Tomorrow might be the day that you're not. So what do we see when things go wrong? And I made a short list about 2 years ago based on all of the incidents that I'd investigated over the years. And it was a really short list, and this is the even more distilled version. I know because I work for HSE, I have to put risk assessment in there, and people always do that risk assessment face of, oh no, she's going to start talking about it. But it is absolutely key to think about risk and how you're going to manage it. It doesn't have to be an incredibly bureaucratic process. You can do a good risk assessment on the back of an envelope, but you need to think about what could go wrong and how you're going to manage it. To go back to that example of a vehicle arriving with a shifted load, that's not unforeseeable. That can happen. It's an obvious thing that can happen. Have you got a plan to deal with that in advance? You can save yourself a lot of heartache later on if you've thought about it and you've got a plan for things like that. If your risk assessment is not suitable, if it's not adequate, you will never get anything else right. So you'll have the wrong equipment, you'll be putting people under time pressures, making decisions under pressures. You'll end up with this, everything's been fine for the last 20 years, it will continue to be fine, and you won't give people the right instructions and the right training. So that risk assessment and the thought process is absolutely key. I said things have improved in the industry, and I think they absolutely have. I think there is a much wider variety of load securing equipment available now than there was when I started looking at this 17 years ago. There's a lot more awareness of load security and the importance of it, although sometimes that's driven primarily by the fear of enforcement. I had an owner driver say to me last week, well, we know we have to secure the loads now because we get stopped and we keep getting tickets. Okay, well, at least you're going in the right way. There is more information available for people, and I think there's more cooperation between the regulators, so you're getting better and more consistent information from us as well. And I'm looking at this and I'm thinking the next slide has actually got messed up, and it has, just looking at the preview of it. So I'm not going to run through all of that because I know we're quite short on time. But in terms of how you can run your business better, you do not have to be perfect. If the worst happens and something goes wrong and we are coming to look at your systems, we don't expect you to be perfect. We're realistic. What we're looking for is evidence that you've thought about what you do, that you've taken steps to manage safety in your business. The problems that we see, honestly, they are very simple and straightforward things, and I've got a couple of examples there. The one on the left, I think, it looked fine from the other side, and you walk round and it's a disaster. It can be little things like that. The one on the right, that's from last week, and if a strap's failed, throw it away. Don't knot it back together and carry on. It's little things that could be picked up. There have been some changes in the enforcement approach that you should be aware of for particular types of load that are much more specific now. Again, I'm not going to go into the detail because of time, but I would say, be aware of what's in the categorisation of vehicle defects. Go and look at the DVSA guidance and make sure you are up to date with the current requirements. There is plenty of advice out there. Safety does not have to be a complicated thing. It's not an optional extra for your business. It's good business sense. If you are running your business safely, if you are managing safety properly, you are cutting your costs. You are protecting your reputation as an operator, and you're protecting the people who work for you. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Just stay there, Nina, please. Thank you, Nina. Any burning questions for Nina from the floor?
And again, I can't see your name tag.
So it's okay. Neither can I. But if there's not, there's a couple of things for me. You've mentioned the category of defects, and it may be something for Charlie to send out to everybody afterwards. And also, you've had the new load security guidance launched back in July, was it? Yeah. Does everybody have a copy of it? Does everybody know where to find the load security guidance notes? Simple Google. Some people are nodding their head. Google's a fabulous tool. Google is an absolute fabulous tool for people. I'm sure Charlie will send the links out to everybody, but effectively that is your load security policy, isn't it? You wouldn't really have to write another one yourself, would you?
Well, it's under constant review though, because people come back to us and say, what about this? What about that? Can you explain this a little bit more? So it's just a constant process of actually, do we need to clarify that a bit?
Okay.
It's always ongoing.
And how many van operators are in the room? Anybody? Yeah. So this question specifically for you two, all right, on your behalf. So you send me lots of pictures of vans loaded incorrectly, of all types, whether they're multi-drop people or workers with the cement mixer in the back and the tools. How strict are the roadside stops now for vans?
There were some new defects for vans when the enforcement approach was updated, as always, because there had been incidents where things had come flying forward and through the bulkhead. So the bulkhead requirement, for example, is now much stricter than it used to be.
So if any of us getting work done on our house with the builders there, just have a look in the back of the van and see how secure their load is. That will tell you how good the work is they're doing on your house. Okay? So just a little thought for you. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you very much.